All right, everyone, I think we're going to get started. According to my iPad and our iPhones, it's 2 p.m., so Apple time, and we're going to kick the session off. So welcome to this afternoon session, the GBCI Rating System Rundown. I'm accompanied here by my colleague, Jamie Statter, and we're looking forward to giving you an overview of, some of the, don't want to wake the baby. Some of the rating systems that GBCI is now certifying to. So we'll start off with introductions, and Jamie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Jamie Statter. I'm the Vice President for Strategic Relationships at GBCI, and USGBC kind of play double duty. My responsibilities are to help bring to users and to the market and to communities and cities the new rating systems, including, but not limited to, Peer, Sites, True, and Parksmart, which hopefully when you leave today, you'll learn all about and how you can use them in your work.
Thanks, Jamie. So I'm seeing many familiar faces in the audience, so a lot of you know me. My name's Sarah Alexander. I head up the certification and credentialing teams in GBCI. I've been with the organization about 9.5 years. And you'll hear me reference in the presentation that I started off my professional career as a geologist and geophysicist, and then went back to school when I had 2 small children to do a degree in architecture, and it was the best thing that I did. So with that, we're going to get started. We've got 4 learning objectives for today, so we have to make sure that we cover all of these. We'll be outlining the relationships and common themes between the different rating systems that we administer. We'll be understanding how each of the rating systems separately address different needs in the built environment. We'll identify some of the overlaps between the various rating systems. And then we'll be looking at some real-world examples of rating system implementation. And we've got a couple that have more than one certification, so using more than one of our programs. So most of you know who GBCI is, but I'm still going to have a little bit of spiel just at the beginning. So what we're about and what our mission is market transformation, just like our parent company, the US Green Building Council. And what we're doing is we're built out with our credentialing and our certification programs to recognize excellence in the green business industry. So it's not just buildings anymore. We've gone beyond that. In the business, the industry is a business, in practice, and we do it globally. So we have rigorous certification and credentialing standards. We drive the adoption of these green building practices and these green business practices, which fosters the global competitiveness that we really need to actually make a difference. We're focused on the environmental benefits, environmental performance, building performance, and also human health. We were established in 2008. So we'll be coming up to our 10-year anniversary next year. And we're the only certification and credentialing body within the green business and sustainability industry to exclusively administer project certifications for the rating systems that are listed here, with the exception of EDGE, where we are a global partner with the International Finance Corporation. So LEED, probably the one that you're most familiar with. It's the most widely used green building rating system in the world. It's holistic. I think it's perfect, almost perfect, and balanced. You have to take into account all aspects of the environment. You can't just focus on one area. And addresses the core system goals that include global climate change, human health, water resources, biodiversity and ecosystems, sustainable and regenerative material cycles, green economy, and enhancing the quality of life for communities. The well building standard, which we started to certify to almost 3 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, is complementary and allows for a deeper dive to focus on features in the built environment that impact human health within a building or a space, including nourishment, fitness, mind. So it's including other aspects of human health within that rating system. As Jamie mentioned, we have Peer, which focuses on power system performance, and this is quite a new one for us, and it's also an industry that is crying out for some modernization. We've all been reading in the news recently what's happened with Puerto Rico, and they have absolutely no power because their grid system is all linked together and they're unable to pull it all back up. So peer-certified power systems are more sustainable, more resilient, more economically sound, and serve their customers at a highest level. It drives major global change at the local level, similar to what we wanted to do when we first introduced LEED all those years ago. With outdated electricity systems, electricity is lost through conversion and waste. And these costs are passed on to consumers. You and I, we're all paying for this. Probably an estimate is around $200 billion per year. That's a lot of money that we could use doing other things. So it's the nation's first rating system that measures and improves power system performance and electricity delivery. It's designed to provide dependable, sustainable power for all, while lowering electricity costs and improving grid reliability and, most importantly, resiliency. So GRESB. How many of you actually participate in the GRESB assessments each year? Are any of you participating in that? You're not. Well, maybe some of the assets, the buildings that you've been involved in are participating. So GRESB is a wholly owned subsidiary of GBCI, and it makes the economic case for green building. It assesses the ESG, the environmental, social, and governance performance of real assets globally, including real estate portfolios and infrastructure assets. And our team here in certification, we do the validation of those assessments each year. And this year, there were 850 participants. We do this in a very concentrated period of time in June and July each year, so everyone's working on it. And there are a number of questions on the survey, so you multiply that by 850, you can start to see the number of questions that we're assessing. And that was the real estate assessment. GRESB introduced last year their infrastructure assessment as well, and we had 236 participants in the infrastructure assessment this year as well. So they use the data in their investment management and engagement process with the clear goal to optimize the risk and return profile of real asset investments. Sites, sustainable sites. So this is the most comprehensive program. It's been out for quite some time now. This is Sites version 2 that we're certifying to. It's the most comprehensive program for designing, developing, and maintaining sustainable landscapes. It's designed to be a complement to LEED, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later in the presentation, and helps conserve, restore, and create the benefits provided by healthy ecosystems. It provides best practices, just as LEED and other rating systems do, as the World Building Standard does, for innovative design and land development and management. EDGE is a program you may not know so much about. It's not available here in the United States. It's a green building rating system for developing countries. So it really focuses on energy and water conservation and the embodied energy in materials. And you're looking for a 20% reduction, predicted 20% reduction in those three metrics across the board. So GBCI is a global partner with the IFC for delivering EDGE in over 130 countries, and we're the exclusive provider in India. So in some countries, there is just one provider. Parksmart. This is a rating system that is really focused on green mobility. Cities are dealing with massive amount of automobile use coming into the city each day, and those vehicles have got to go somewhere. And it recognizes sustainable practices in parking structure management and programming, design and technology. And if you think about it, parking is one of the largest land uses in a city, so this is a really important subject. And the number of motor vehicles on the road is predicted to grow to 2 billion by 2030. The question is, will they have drivers in them? Will they be driverless? Something will still be out there. The True Rating System, now this was formerly known as Zero Waste. It's looking at total resource use and efficiency, and it's a certification system that enables organizations and facilities to define, pursue, and achieve their zero waste goals. It has a minimum of a 90% diversion rate to even be considered for the rating system. It helps them cut their carbon footprint, supporting public health, and as markets continue to urbanize and industrialize, cities and businesses are faced with the increasing amount of waste that puts a strain on resources and communities. The Investor Confidence Project. Before the announcements this week, this was the newest program that had come into the GBCI family. This came in at the beginning of the year. And if we think of GRESB looking at one end, valuing assets once they are performing, what the Investor Confidence Project is trying to do, it's providing a protocol, a standardized protocol for underwriting energy retrofits. So the Investor Ready Energy Efficiency Certification is what can be earned with this program. And it allows investors to know that that has had the appropriate checks and balances put on what the predicted energy savings are for that particular energy retrofit that is being proposed. And you can start tying the investment community who tell us that they have lots of money they want to invest in green projects and the 256 billion square meters, I'm going to go with metrics, square meters of existing building stock around the globe that does need to be improved. Give you a sense of what our team has been doing this year. So LEED is still our main rating system, but the newer rating systems are growing rapidly. So we've done about 10,000 phases of review for LEED year to date this year. Gives you a little bit of a sense of the volume that comes through the door. But with our other rating systems, particularly the well building standard, with TRUE, the Zero Waste program, and with EDGE in Latin America, we're starting to see a lot more projects in those rating systems coming through. So across these programs, we've done over 300 phases of review or site assessments or performance verification visits as well. So if we look at the building blocks that might make up a community or a neighborhood or indeed a city, and the amenities and services that everyone uses each day, we can start to see that in some instances, specialized rating systems are needed. So we have this beautiful holistic system called LEED, but you might be interested in going in more depth in a particular aspect that is covered by LEED, but not in the depth that you want to go to. So if you really want to look at the interior of the building and human health, you might want to go with well. If you want to really focus on your sites, and Jamie's got some great examples later on, then you might also want to supplement it and do a site certification as well. So these are just a couple of images where we are here in Boston. So when you live in a city, you've got residential areas, you've got schools, you've got movie theaters, you've got retail, you've got a commercial district, you've got infrastructure, you've got all these different pieces that come together to make the community so that it can function and everybody can live. So what we'd like to do today is just have that visual of a city and everything that goes into it. We'd like to approach from a slightly different perspective. So we're not going to go through each of the rating systems in turn. We're going to choose 4 themes. So the first theme that we want to talk about is resiliency. The second one is human health. The third is the circular economy. And lastly, bringing it all back together again, sustainable urbanism. As I said earlier, some of you know that I started off my career as a geologist and geophysicist before going back to school to do architecture. In both instances, these are technical interests. So whether you're a scientist and you're trying to decide whether you should spend millions of dollars on drilling an oil or gas exploration well in this place, or you're a design professional and you're deciding whether you're going to spend millions of dollars on a particular strategy or design feature, we are, in essence, truth seekers. We want to get it right. And I think that is something that is an aligning core for me throughout my professional career. So as living, carbon-based organisms, there are certain fundamental building blocks that are necessary for our existence. For example, oxygen. Plants give us most of our oxygen and trees. Water. Without these two, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't last very long. But within the grand scheme of geological time, we are comparative newbies on the block, as it were. But in terms of our impact on our neighbors, we're a pretty loud and brash bunch. And that's something that we all are here today because we know we need to correct. And sometimes it seems like at the moment in the news, we just are surrounded by stories of tragedies, of terrible events that have happened. And it's destruction, it's whether it's natural or whether it's man-made. But at the same time, human ingenuity and inventiveness never ceases to amaze me. And I'm just going to sort of step aside and tell a little anecdote from just over a year ago. And I don't know if you remember the bombing at Brussels Airport. It was in March 2016. And it just happened that my family had some family visiting. And my stepbrother and I and his daughter, we decided to go and visit the Air and Space Museum at Dulles Airport in just outside Washington, D.C. And if you've never been, it's amazing. So we went there. We've got in our mind what's happening in Europe. We're hearing all these stories coming across on the news, and we're out there. We're seeing Concorde. We're seeing Blackbird. We're seeing the evolution of Pratt & Whitney engines. Just amazing things to see there. It's a huge, great big hangar. And just about coming to the end of my tour, and I walked around the corner, and wow, what was facing me was the black nose cone of Discovery. And it had the most amazing impact. It was so emotional at that time. Here I was hearing about all this human destruction, just wantonly blowing people up. And there in front of me was just what we could do. We've been to the moon and back, not once, but again and again. We can go out to space. We have explored the furthest reaches of our solar system. Humans can do amazing things. So yes, there's sometimes bad news, but really, if we all work together, there's a lot of good that we can do. So here are some of the photographs that we see. We have real chronic air quality problems. I don't know if you've been reading in the news, but Delhi, who's had some very poor air quality for quite some time, it's now got to the point where their air quality index can't even measure it anymore. Schools are closed. It is so bad. And air quality is no respecter of your economic or social background. We all breathe the same air. Similarly, we've been exposed to some very strong hurricanes and storms this year. Texas, Puerto Rico, Florida, they're still recovering from what's happened this year. And conversely, too much water in those instances, there are parts of the world and parts of our country that are really suffering from water scarcity. And remember, humble H2O, we can't do without it. Our blue planet has incredible power, not only destructive as seen with major earthquakes, and having studied geology, I think she was just sort of turning a shoulder when those terrible earthquakes happened in Mexico. If Mother Earth really wants to do something, we have nothing to contend against it. We are really insignificant. But we can mitigate, we can build more resiliency. So again, we're the new kids on the block. But there are some people around, or some organisms around, that have been around for a very long time that we can learn things from about resiliency. Horseshoe crabs, 450 million years and counting. Your friendly cockroach in your home, at least 100 million years and probably longer. Water bears, that's one I love, it's cute. 530 million years. These are tiny, half a millimeter, maybe a millimeter-sized organisms. It's possible that they could survive in space. They sort of exist in areas around mosses, lichens, where there's a little bit of moisture. They can go dormant for years, get some moisture, the right conditions back, and back they pop out. So having started off my career with geology, geomorphology, and looking at the natural world, we are and should be aware and humbled by what we have here in our very special blue planet. But it's the creation of the complex and balanced ecosystems over millennia, such as the wetlands shown in this image, perfect in form for their function, that is an eternal source of inspiration, certainly for myself and my daily work. We can learn so much from studying these natural systems. Don't try and fight them, go with them, learn something from them as we build and build our cities in a sustainable way. After all, the Earth has been a living lab for the last 3.8 billion years, perfecting all that we see today. Jamie.
So while Sarah comes at this from the perspective of a scientist, and we just talked a lot about the Earth, its history, geological time, I come at these challenges we face from the perspective of cities and communities. I am endlessly fascinated at how we organize ourselves into small, tiny places where we live, work, eat, reproduce. And I think it's incumbent upon us as we deal with climate change, both mitigating to the extent that we still can and driving resiliency, that we think about how we live and work and how we want that to be for the future. And one element that, of course, has been a core component of the US GBC and GBCI work over the years is focusing on the next generation. And that's something that as practitioners, as people who work in this field in one form or another, we need to just constantly remember that our work is contributing to making a better life for the next generation. The other perspective that I personally come at this from is having the unfortunate distinction of having lived in New Orleans during Katrina and then New York during Sandy, which the following question everyone always asks is, where do I live now? The answer to that is Washington, D.C. So anyway, the feeling of helplessness after Katrina was sort of paralyzing for me. It was this horrifying experience. We depopulated a major American city for months. The storm happened the last week in August. I was in the first wave of people to go back to New Orleans, and I didn't get back till the first week in October. And even then, we weren't really able to stay. We were kind of just in and out, grabbing our things. But I've also had the privilege of being part of the work that's happened to rebuild New Orleans into a vibrant city once again. And this, for those of you that have been around the Green Build world before, you've certainly seen this. This is, of course, the Make It Right project down in the lower 9th Ward, which I was connected with in a previous role and continue to adore. And the thing about Make It Right is that it has found a way to create beauty out of something that was so horrifying. It is also the largest concentration of LEED Platinum homes in the world, the largest concentration of homes designed by award-winning architects in the world, and it is incredibly equitable in how it's done this. The vast majority of people that live in the Make It Right homes are former residents of the 9th Ward. So we've seen the ability for an organization to take tragedy and build back from it stronger. And it really is an adaptive project in the fact that they are building these homes truly below sea level in a very vulnerable place. So that's one perspective. The other side of this that I do want to hit on is this idea that we need to think about the places we gather and building sense of community and how we can drive that sense of community through the work that we do. Cultural institutions, schools, et cetera, how is all of this connected? And you may have thought that we lost focus on the general principle of what this session is, which is the rating systems, but we have not. I think what we're trying to get across is that when you look at the rating systems and you run through the list, and it might feel like GBCI is just adding rating systems for the sake of having certification programs, but really, that's not it at all. What we're trying to do is drive a global vision of sustainability. And I hope that what we'll show in the rest of this presentation is how all of this kind of fits together and can enhance the work that we do. In my role, I primarily work on the non-LEED programs, but yet I think that it's very important that we reflect on LEED and what it did so that we can think about how we can scale in other ways. So LEED is less than 20 years old, and the remarkable impact that it has had is stunning. So now we certify projects in 167 countries. We have certified over 6 billion square feet, so Sarah uses metrics, I use the feet. And most importantly, in my perspective, there are over 200,000 LEED accredited individuals in one form or another. So that's 200,000 people whose jobs, daily jobs, have been changed as a result of LEED. And these are traditional jobs. You all know this. These are architects and engineers. These aren't sort of newfangled things that we made up. It is really shifting a traditional career into a green space, the true definition of a green job. So how did we do this? It was a movement building exercise, right? It wasn't just, here's a rating system, here's a series of credits, go at it. We strategically built a community of committed professionals. We allowed for a rating system to implement global goals at a local level. So at a project-by-project level, you can implement big-time goals, address climate change one building at a time. And then finally, through this process, LEED facilitated the development of regional and local action for scale. So all of this put together is kind of the movement building that LEED did that we need to see happen in other areas of the built environment for us to be successful in addressing our climate challenge. One more thing on LEED. LEED is simple and, as Sarah says, perfect. It is done all of these things by creating a holistic system and an integrated approach. So it doesn't function as a prescriptive tool. You have the opportunity to tailor it for regional, local context, for the type of building, but it does always look at the integrated process, energy, water, waste, indoor environmental quality, and transportation. So regardless, you know that you're looking at components in those categories, but yet it is tailorable to your needs. So, one more step back. As an organization, we are trying to align ourselves with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And you'll probably, for any session you're coming to with our colleagues this week, you will likely see this slide. The LEED V4 system goals are aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and the growth of the GBCI portfolio is aligned with this as well. And that is very much intended to be a framework by which we think, how can we go beyond the tremendous success LEED has so that we can really impact lives in the most impactful way and really drive action primarily on climate change, but across all of these other components as well. And the way that we do this is by focusing on communities, focusing on projects, and ensuring that they meet all of these criteria, that communities are safe, healthy, inclusive, smart, productive, efficient, equitable, sustainable, responsive, and resilient. So let's think about this and where we were with LEED. So this, of course, is Lower Manhattan after Sandy, which obviously has quite a high concentration of LEED-certified buildings, and yet only one building has power. That is the Goldman Sachs building, by the way. This, of course, we have to think about mobility. Beyond the building, what do we do about green mobility, and how do we enhance transportation solutions? We have to make strategic planning decisions. We need to think about green infrastructure and how we protect our communities from storms. We need to build wetlands when they've gone away. We need to create spaces that act like sponges. We need to address drought. We need to address the toxins and the waste that is going back into the earth and minimize our footprint overall. And then finally, we really need to think about equitability and ensuring that every human has a safe place to live. So we return now to these rating systems. And when we look at it in this sense, they aren't just a series of checklists, and they aren't discrete. They are nestled amongst each other and can work in interactive ways. And as promised, we're now going to talk about the themes that we identified at the top. So thinking about resiliency, it probably is the biggest buzzword out there in this community at this point, and it has been for the last, let's say, 5-6 years. But that doesn't mean that it's meaningless. We're going to work with this definition of resiliency, which is resiliency is the capacity of buildings, landscapes, communities, and regions to withstand, recover from, and respond to natural and man-made disasters and disturbances. Think about resiliency in terms of shocks. How can we protect against big shocks to the system? And then when we drill down a little bit further and we start to think about how we implement that type of global goal, we have to get specific. So we want to address storms. We want to drive in integration of new technology. We want to make sure design is a part of this. We want to be adaptive. We want to protect ourselves and decrease our vulnerabilities and ensure that we have power.
So we've identified 4 of our rating systems that look at this in very different ways. And we are sort of presenting it in this sense so that you can think about, what type of project do I have? I know I want to be resilient, both to climate change and to other types of disasters. And how do I do that in a real way? So let's start with sites. Sites, of course, is focused on this idea of green infrastructure, of external to the building. It looks at water management as a core resiliency component, and that's water management both in terms of too much water and too little water. So it addresses drought issues as well as managing places that have an overflow of water, huge amounts of storm water, et cetera. One of the ways it does this is through appropriate vegetation and the focus of on soil. And then, of course, it has this focus on regenerative systems that can bounce back. If sites is green infrastructure, pier is hard infrastructure. We are talking about electrical systems, and the credits in pier that drive resiliency are really very technical. They look at how are you building your power system so that it can withstand what I showed on the slide a few slides ago, a Sandy-like occurrence. And you do that by integrating particular capabilities and designs that enhance a microgrid capability. It's microgrid architecture is the way we refer to it. You track your interruptions and minimize those. You prevent damage physically of your infrastructure. And then, of course, as we're hearing more and more, you have an alternate source of supply and storage. And in many ways, that is also sustainable in nature, especially when you start to move into solar plus storage. With LEED, this could be any number of things, and we just picked a couple, which is reduced parking footprint, housing and jobs proximity, heat island reduction, rainwater management, et cetera. EDGE is really about the mitigation component, which of course is resilient in nature, energy efficiency, renewable energy, carbon reporting, and the embodied energy and materials. So thinking about sites, this is the type of project that sites would certify. And of course, you see the city in the background. You're creating green infrastructure to protect that city and creating places for humans to interact. And to give an example of a peer project, we have University of Texas at Austin, which is the entire campus is peer certified. And much of that is due to its resiliency of sorts. It has 80% higher reliability than the larger Austin energy grid. And the larger Austin energy grid is a very high-performing grid. And it does this by enabling systems to switch to an external power supplier or easily transfer back to on-site generation. It has full islanding capability, so it can completely disconnect from the larger grid in case of emergency. And of course, the energy efficiency is extremely high. So that covers resiliency for us. We're now going to move to human health. Human health is obviously an incredibly important component of the work that GBCI does, that USGBC does. And in the case of this session, we're going to think about this from the perspective of how the built environment and buildings affect the prosperity, vitality, and longevity of people. In this case, we want to see reduction of pollution. We want to minimize waste, get very specific VOC reduction. We want to think about local impacts, global impacts, nutrition, water. It runs the gambit. And here we are again. So in this sense, LEED has very much led the way. It really addressed global health impacts related to climate change at a project-by-project level. It revolutionized the way we think about indoor air quality. Of course, the environmental product disclosure is a completely other side of this health impact. And then a very specific one that we want to call out because of the market transformation that occurred as a result was the low VOC component of LEED. WELL is entirely focused on the health performance of the interior of a place. It therefore is focused on the local health impacts. And it looks at things like occupant behavior as a cornerstone of the system. But it also looks at air quality. It also looks at water quality. Then take a step back and think about how we use our places and spaces. We've got the inside, and then we have the outside. So what sites does is it ensures high quality of resources that therefore protect human health through the prior prioritization of ecosystem services, which are the services provided to humans by ecosystems. Some of those services include the ability to purify water, to regulate disease, to improve air quality, reduce pollution in the atmosphere. It also reduces toxins that goes out into the environment. But then we also have this whole other component of sites, which is creating a place for humans, human habitat. And in the rating system, you'll see credits for creating opportunities for mental health, for mental respite, for social gatherings, for on-site food production. And then finally, TRUE, which one is Total Resource Use and Efficiency, once again, formerly known as Zero Waste. That is looking at the elimination of hazardous substances, what goes back into the environment, the waste footprint, and therefore disease mitigation through things like life cycle analysis. Just a sense of a certified project that we want to highlight here is the ASID Washington, D.C. headquarters, which is Platinum Well certified. It used components of biophilic design, advanced water filtration, circadian lighting. The employees have access to healthy snacks, sound masking systems. So as you can see, a well-certified platinum project is quite holistic in the way that it looks at human health. And then this is the slide we've promised a few times, which is, if you've ever seen me talk about sites, I linger on this for quite a while. I won't do that today, but it is my favorite image. So at the top there, you see the same building, and that is a LEED Platinum building before and after. And so it just shows sort of the extent to which you can drive positive outcomes for humans once you layer in sites. So the after on the, which the very obvious after pictures, show a site's 3-star project that was in the pilot phase of sites prior to our acquisition. And all of a sudden, you've got a place for humans to interact, healthy ecosystems, a much more sustainable, beautiful, healthy place. And so just the striking way that we can enhance a LEED Platinum building by thinking beyond it is one of my favorite little bits to tell. And finally, for me, we're going to cover the circular economy. So we sort of stole this definition from another organization who we've credited. But the circular economy is the economy in which we keep resources in use for as long as possible, extract the maximum value of them while in use, then recover and regenerate products and materials at the end of each service life. This is what we've been talking about all week: cradle to cradle, redesign, reducing, closed loop, reuse. And then, of course, number one on this is true zero waste, which is a holistic system for managing a waste stream and diverting waste. There's a 90% diversion requirement for zero waste. It looks at upstream and downstream solutions, and it prioritizes closed loop processes, which is exactly what the circular economy is looking for. LEED does this type of work through products and materials, through waste management, local sourcing. Parksmart might seem a little odd here, but this is really about adaptive reuse, taking a place and managing the asset so that it is a better functioning asset for where it sits. It integrates technologies, it reduces toxins in cleaning supplies and in materials. And then finally, EDGE. EDGE is really innovative in its approach to embedded energy and materials. How much energy is put into creating what we use, these products that we have all around us that are in our buildings? That is sort of the cornerstone of the EDGE materials credits. So one project example from TRUE that I'd like to hit on is the Tesla factory, which is, when it was zero waste, certified to gold level. This is a huge factory, and it diverts 99% of its waste from landfills. It has composting on site, waste-to-energy facilities, but really, the innovative bits aren't on this slide. They have on-site scrap metal, reuse, a person on site that's job it is to reuse scrap metal. They also reuse everything on site. They have a center where people go and drop off their used goods, whether it be batteries, tires, office supplies. It gets barcoded, and then they scan it and find another purpose for it. So it's a completely closed-loop system at this factory, which is just amazing. And as a result of evaluating just what was going into their dumpsters and fixing the system, they've saved $100,000 a year. I also want to highlight the garage at Post Office Square here in Boston, which we'll be doing a tour of on Friday. So this is a reuse of a garage. It has eliminated all cleaning chemicals within the garage. The sharing economy is an important component of the circular economy, and it has a high number of car share hubs and reserved spaces. And then it also has a rainwater harvesting system. So thinking about a parking garage as contributing positively back into the city environment, it's pretty remarkable. And I encourage you to go on the tour if it's not already full. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Sarah.
Thanks, Jamie. Okay, so we're coming full circle again now. We're back to sustainable urbanization. So those slides, those images you had of Boston that we shared at the beginning, this is something that we want to really focus on. So if we think about just before the first industrial revolution, so we're looking back in the 1800s now, about 3% of the population lived in urban environments. Currently, we're at about 50%, and within the next decade or so, we're expected to be 66% of the world's population is going to be moving into an urban environment. So we have a really critical job to do here. I go to India quite often, and if you think about what's happening in India, so the population of the United States fluctuates a little bit, about 350 million people in the United States. That's the number of people that are expected to move to an urban center in India in just the next 5 to 7 years. Imagine that mass migration, and you've got to have the infrastructure and the facilities to be able to accommodate that. So it really is a very pressing issue. So sustainable cities and sustainable infrastructure, this is what you want to be thinking about when you're doing your design. Inclusiveness, resilience, efficient and sustainable planning and management of resources, services and buildings. You want everyone to be able to have access to clean drinking water, waste is taken away, public spaces for gathering, for enjoying the outside. Infrastructure is really critical in urban areas and cities. So LEAD for Cities was announced as a pilot program at last year's Green Build. It really launched in December of last year. And it's an all-encompassing program that looks at sustainability and much more, the quality of life, health, prosperity, equity and education, resiliency and infrastructure within an urban center. And it helps a city demonstrate its commitment to its citizens. So it's about transparency, being able to demonstrate that the strategies that you're putting in place are actually delivering performance and improved performance. So the ARC platform allows participants to measure their performance and captures metrics across an expandable array, actually, of performance indicators. So we're looking at the main 5 core categories that you have in LEAD. So you're all used to energy, water, waste, the human experience, so human health, and transportation. Those are the 5 key metrics that we're measuring. But what this program does is it allows you to address those concerns on a global scale. More than ever, local governments are committing to problem solving and to sharing information in order to do so. And citizens are requiring them to do so. Leaders, especially in growing cities, have an enormous opportunity to initiate a dynamic dialogue with citizens and earn their trust in the process. So Lead for Cities brings that new level of leadership transparency as a way to verify the effectiveness of your leaders. So it is that transparent. For example, cities provides greenhouse gas emissions calculations. So this is a way for a city to submit their greenhouse gas emissions based on energy consumption and other sources, enabling you to track how you are doing towards your goals. And you'll be able to communicate your city's sustainability performance in a consistent format that is meaningful around the world. So we weren't sure when we launched this program, it was a pilot, how interested would people be? Well, more than 20 cities and communities have already registered. There are 45 in the pipeline. We are impacting over 3,000 square kilometers of space, more than 10 million individuals. We've got 3 that have been certified. And the first one was Washington, D.C., so my hometown, Jamie's hometown, is doing reasonably well. So this is the performance score that I mentioned earlier. The one key thing that we've added to it from a city perspective is really looking at that human experience and understanding that in a city context, we need a little bit more context. So there are 5 subcategories within that one that deal with education, health, safety, equitability, and prosperity. Now, I'm not expecting anyone to read this as sort of a kaleidoscope of color. No one's expected to read this. But what this is doing is it's saying, even though that's what we're going to be reporting out on, you can have an array of different metrics that you're tracking that will feed up into that. So, for example, intelligent traffic management gives a sense of the intelligent traffic management maps to transportation. Health service accessibility maps to the subcategory health. Mobile emergency services and GPS-enabled crime tracking, that would map up to the subcategory of safety. So our system aims to be an aggregator of and supplement to in other important initiatives and tools, whether it's C40, Star Communities, welcome to our community, ISO 37120, the Carbon Registry, City Health Dashboard, the Global Livability Index. It is flexible enough that you can bring those into the system. So as I said, Washington was the first project to be certified, and it reached platinum level. And this is what it looks like when you're in the ARC platform. This is your performance score. So you can see a performance score of 84. That means that you're over 80, so you're at a platinum level. You look at the energy score, human experience. There's some work to do there in the district, but doing very well on water and waste at the moment. And we have a very good public transportation network, and that's reflected in this score. So what else are we doing in this new technology platform? What I'm finding to be so exciting is the analytics that's built into it. So if we look at a building as an example, but it could equally apply to a portfolio or a community, but we're just going to look at a building as an example. Within the platform, you can see various statistics for your projects across customized reporting periods. You can look at the amount of waste per individual, per occupant, per square foot. You can do the same for energy and water consumption. You can always play around with various calculators to see how much you need to improve in order to achieve your goals. And within the system, there will be all these strategies that you can pull from to implement so that you do achieve your performance goals. Within this platform, all places are in. And LEED, we think of this original holistic design that brought all aspects of the built environment together. You can see this is now how all of the different needs within that built environment, whether it's energy grids, whether it's parking, whether it's a space or public transit or health, this now all integrates into that GBCI rating system family, and ARC becomes the nexus for how we integrate those programs together. So, for example, you have the sustainable site system. If you have a sites goal project, you will automatically earn all the sustainable sites points within LEED if you choose to apply for LEED. In the ARC platform, our vision is that you have your project in there, you may be registered for sites, but there'll be other tabs that you can go and have a look. So you can look at what your LEED scorecard is looking like, you can look at what your Parksmart scorecard is looking like, your zero waste, your true zero waste scorecard. And where we've got equivalencies, you will automatically be earning points across the board so that it is seamlessly integrated. We're not there yet, but that is our vision. And lastly, transparency being everything. So performance really does matter. You're not going to improve what you don't first measure. Now, we all know that with the LEED rating system since 2009, all projects that are certified are required to report their energy and water data for 5 years post-certification. We haven't made that very easy for you up until now, but now it is. So with the launch of the ARC platform, this is now easy. Every project that is a LEED registered project or certified project can access their project in ARC. They have free access to it, and you can start putting in your energy and water performance data. What we've also done is we've made some changes. We've connected the ARC platform with our LEED project directory. So now when you go into the LEED project directory, you will be able to see which projects are actually current and are reporting. There will be icons to show that, yep, they've reported their energy data, yep, they've reported their water data, and those that have not. I mean, this is going to be a proactive campaign. We want to encourage as many projects as possible to take that next step and actually start reporting their performance data, because with more data, we can all improve. So performance really matters, and that's one of the lasting aspects we want to leave you with, whether we're talking about human health, whether we're talking about climate change. Being able to measure actionable performance is what's really going to make the changes. And with that, we'd like to say thank you and open the floor to questions. This session is being recorded, so if you could please go to the microphone to ask your question, then everyone can hear it, and the videographer can as well. No questions. Okay, well, thank you. Oh, nope, we have one coming up.
Just need somebody to go first.
Hi, my name's Katie Sheasley. So I have a question about the other rating systems. So when you're talking with clients, obviously some, if not most, have heard about LEED. Most haven't heard of WELL or PEER or GRESB or the others. So how do you encourage them to look at other programs when there's not recognition by them or even their clients?
Well, sometimes it's an education process, isn't it? I'm sure that's what you find when you're going to clients. And we have to do this now with all these new rating systems, because sometimes it says, oh my goodness, there are so many, what do I do? You sort of get paralysis because there's so much looking at it. But it's really through, what we've discovered is through a process of really asking questions of what the client's goals are, that then we can start to bring them towards meeting those goals. And it could be that it's more than one rating system, or it could be that it is one rating system. What we're finding more and more that I think is interesting is that, you know, LEED is now so well known globally. People are still doing LEED because it's still a very robust and rigorous process. But we do find that there are projects, the Tesla factory want to get Tesla into LEED, but they're really interested in how their facility is operating in waste. Before that, they had nothing to go to. Now we've got something for them. Parksmart's been another very interesting one. We've now got projects that are coming through that are almost mixed use. And these might be underground parking garages, and on the top is a park. And there's a convening area, a gathering area. As Jamie was saying, you've got rideshare programs there. So it becomes more of a hub in a community. So I think it's asking questions of clients. Anything we can do to give you the right information so that you can address that, just let us know. Jamie particularly would be interested in helping with that.
And to some extent, we know that part of our job is to help establish the recognition. I'll just add two things. The first is the success of LEED is remarkable, as I've said several times, but the one thing to note is that there are no more firsts left in LEED. You have the opportunity to offer your client to be the first in every category in most of the other rating systems, and that's a real thing. It is not every building on this block in San Francisco, for example, is a LEED building. But you don't have that kind of leadership first potential. Second, those of us that primarily focus on the market side of the new rating systems understand that this is on us and it's on you, together and jointly. So we've started creating things such as client decks that you are able to download on our website, that you can take a deck we've made with speaker notes, adapt it as you'd like, and present it to your client. We do quarterly calls where you're able to interact with other practitioners. So we're building this from the ground up. And I just should remind you, LEED had also started at zero. So we're optimistic that the approach of the professionals, projects, local action will coalesce into being able to scale at that same level.
And just to emphasize, we're here to help, right?
Yes.
So the well building standard obviously is one that's getting really quite a lot of uptake. About 50% of the projects are international versus domestic, so you can see it's growing internationally right from the get-go. There are a whole slew of people at IWBI who absolutely will help you with talking with clients. Our team can as well in terms of the well assessors. There are resources. You just need to ask us. We've put our email addresses up here. We've got our business cards down. You can go to the Contact Us form. We do conference calls all day long, happy to do it, different time zones. We want to help you be successful because that's how we do market transformation.
Hi, I appreciate your comment about how all of the different rating systems are meant to work together, really more or less seamlessly and synergize each other. Now, you don't originate, the GBCI doesn't originate any of that content, and for obvious reasons, you need to be at arm's length in order to preserve the validity of the rating system. But when the GBCI isn't originating the content itself behind the rating systems, what can you say about the long-term viability of these going on into the future when you don't really control what the rating systems evolve into?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So we have to remember what LEAD was like in those early years, right? I joined the organization in summer of 2008, and what you might call the upward curve, the sudden escalation had happened just before that. Before that, things were moving along in a nice upward projection, but it wasn't this sudden steep climb. We're looking for that for some of these new programs. Some of them may not get there, right? We don't know. These are early days. But what we're seeing is a lot of interest. In terms of integrating them, I think if we can make the user experience as seamless as possible, I think it will push people to do more. Because it won't be an exercise in having to repeat documentation 4 or 5 times. You'll do it once, it'll apply across the board. Whether or not you want to apply for that certification, you can see how far you're going. I think with the group that we've got, we're actually pretty optimistic on all of them. We know that peer and the electrical grid is probably the hardest one. I mean, changing that industry is really extremely challenging. So we like to think that, we're all in the incubator period. An incubator period will depend on the program, but it's probably going to be at least 3 to 5 years, and for peer, I think it'll be longer. And for cities, when you're talking about resiliency and looking at the city scale, those will be longer as well because of just the amount of work that has to be done to show improvement. So thank you, great question.
Well, thank you all very much. Please reach out.
Bye-bye.